What is the key to the future of the United States and Western civilization? Take a look at this clip over here with Mark Levin talking to historian Neil Ferguson. And they're talking about where our country is holding, where our civilization is holding, and how we might go about fixing it. So we'll watch this clip together and then talk about it. But first, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Check this out.
Neil, I'm very concerned about the nature of things in the West, and especially the United States. I mean, Britain and France, don't get me wrong, Australia, Canada, I see it all, we all see it all, but here in the United States, if the Marxist, Islamist, neo-fascist ideologies really become formidable, and I think they're becoming formidable, then there's really no other place on the face of the earth to push back. What is your attitude? What do you see?
The United States is the key to the future survival of Western civilization. That is why I became an American citizen, Mark, because it all hinges on the United States. And the United States has one big advantage, which is it has an operating system, the Constitution, that is above all a guarantee of liberty. And as long as we don't lose sight of that, then all the bad ideologies that exist and have existed for many years cannot ultimately challenge our liberty.
But what about the fact that these movements, and we even see within the Democrat Party, I would argue, attempt to destroy the barriers that are actually in the Constitution, separation of powers, who gets to do what, open borders to basically change the citizenry. I mean, even Aristotle said that's revolution by immigration that changes a society and a culture. The failure of assimilation. In other words, we see these various areas of the culture that have been or are being devoured from within. And even, at least a half a dozen of the framers of the Constitution said, look, if the people lose their virtue, we can write whatever we want. This isn't gonna hold up. So I agree with you about the Constitution. But are you concerned about what you're seeing taking place in our schools, in our society, in our media generally?
Yes, Mark, and I've been concerned about it for many years. I do think that the consoling thought is that the Constitution has withstood such challenges before. In the late 19th century, a huge surge of immigration brought all kinds of ideologies into the United States: anarchism, communism, socialism. And we worried then, with good reason, that these posed a threat to the Constitution and to American values. It turned out that the United States was very good at absorbing all kinds of foreign elements and creating Americans, whether people came from Eastern Europe or whether they came from all kinds of different parts of the world. The success of the American experiment in the 20th century was that it somehow was able to make them all Americans. Now we face a similar challenge. It's a bigger challenge because the foreign-born share of the population is even larger now than it was in the late 19th century. We had, 2.3 million net migration annually under the Biden-Harris administration. This is an unprecedented challenge. And as you mentioned, Mark, there is a substantial Muslim proportion of that influx, which is new. That was not something that was a feature of the late 19th or early 20th century. What is particularly concerning to me, Mark, is that this has coincided with the spread through our educational system of a radical relativist ideology that is profoundly hostile to the United States, that wants to reframe American history as if it is primarily a history of white supremacy, of enslavement, and so forth. People forget, when they are indoctrinated in this way, that the least original aspect of American history was that there was slavery in some of the southern states. There was slavery everywhere. Slavery was a feature of just about every imperial order. The unique thing about the United States was the creation of a constitution which prioritized liberty above all else. That was new, and we must never lose sight of the power of that innovation. We are approaching 250 years of success as a republic. Not many republics have lasted that long. In fact, virtually none. But as Franklin said, a republic if you can keep it. What encourages me, Mark, is that we are worrying, that you are worrying, that you are worried is part of how we keep our liberty. Realizing that these ideologies, you've mentioned them, but I'll say it again, Islamism, communism, neo-fascism, these ideologies are fundamentally hostile to the core American value of liberty. But we're a tolerant people. We allow free speech. The First Amendment says the government can't stop you saying crazy stuff. That's a distinctive feature of our system, and we therefore have to defend the right of people to say things that we find odious. That's the nature of freedom. So I'm not a pessimist because we've withstood these challenges before. You know, I was just reading a great new biography of Bill Buckley, and it reminded me that in the 1930s, anti-Semitism, isolationism, communism, all these bad ideas were flourishing in parts of the United States, were popular in parts of the United States, but they vanished or were driven to the margins in the period of World War II and during the Cold War years. American conservatism got rid of its toxic anti-Semitism, which had been there in the 30s. It got rid of its kind of defeatist isolationism. So we know how to do this as long as we remain true to the core foundational principles of our republic. The toxic ideologies of the past can't win.
The United States will be the make it or break it for the rest of the civilized world. That's true. I also agree with him that generally speaking, we have to take a stance of optimism and look at things in the scope of history. A lot of people today feel like we've never been more divided, that the American people, American society has never been more divided, that we're on the brink of civil war. But when you look from a historical perspective, don't forget that we actually did fight a civil war. So as far as like this being the time we were most divided, this is not the time that we were most divided. Perhaps that was the time we were most divided, when we actually fought a civil war, not on the brink of civil war. Doesn't mean it's good, but when you put it in context, what people usually mean when they say that they never felt so divided is maybe this year or these days in comparison to how things were 20, 30, or 40 years ago. And part of the reason for that, perhaps, is that the chasm has certainly expanded as to what the left and the right believe and how they live and where their mind is and what they hope for their future. Also, the social media and smartphones have extended that, and people are much more likely to be rude and make bad comments and mean when they're in the online space, as opposed to having to actually confront someone in real life. I think a lot of it is because of that. But again, when you focus on the historical context, we have been more divided. This has been around before. The place that I might take a different approach, or at least kind of question how we're going to get through it, is he brings up the 1930s, where yes, there were in the early part of the 1900s, the Ku Klux Klan was marching through Washington, D.C. in tremendous numbers. In the 1930s, there were Nazi rallies. There was a famous Nazi rally in Madison Square Garden. This was a building sentiment. You had American heroes like Charles Lindbergh that were affiliating themselves with that movement. So that it definitely there was an energy moving in that direction as well. But then he says correctly that World War II kind of shifted that, and we extended our patriotism. We all went to defeat Nazism, and after that, things certainly calmed down and became much better. We reclaimed that American spirit. Question is, how does that take place in the world that we currently live in without a war, without a World War III? We don't want to have to go into an actual war in order to find, once again, what our values and culture are supposed to be. The question is, how do we do that? Right? The Civil War, the right side won, right? The Union won, and we reestablished our values. During World War II, all of these bad ideologies, okay, we regained our values afterwards. The question is, how do we regain the values without having a war go on. I don't want war. Nobody wants war. But how do we get back to the place where we need to be, what our values are, what our history is, what our culture is meant to be, what our religious faith is meant to be, what we're oriented in the Hebrew biblical values that our founders established this country on. Don't forget, as was correctly stated, that our founders wanted a moral and religious people. And John Adams famously said that this country, our Constitution, is only made for a moral and religious people. Why? Because if you give people all sorts of freedoms, if it's not grounded in something, it's not grounded in a value system that is good, then all of those freedoms are just going to wind up bringing people and allowing people to go to crazy places, allow crazy things to freely express themselves. And so if you're grounded in something, if you have a value system, a religiously minded system, doesn't mean a specific religion, but a religious mind, the way that you act, the way that you think, the way that you view the world, then this freedom will be something that can help express that. But if you don't have any moral character, if you're not grounded in something real, if you're not espousing the founding ideals of the Bible that our founders wanted expounded, then we wind up potentially leading to bad places. And so rather than having to regain our value system and who we are through a war or through finding a common enemy or anything like that, why don't we start by in our own lives refinding ourselves and realigning ourselves with our faith, with our religious commitments, with our founding spirit of one nation under God, and expressing that in our own circle of influence. If you like this content overall, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Take care.